Good evening, everyone. Greetings from Palau. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Hilary Thompson, and I'm the Executive Director at the Australian Hydrographic Office. But this week I've been in Palau for the Southwest Pacific Hydrographic Commission meeting, which concluded today. So it's evening time here, but we're looking forward to joining this webinar with everybody else online, and it's great to see everybody saying hello in the chat. So we're going to start off with an introduction from Luigi from the IHO. So can I hand over to you, Luigi, for your introduction?
So thank you very much for giving me the floor, and it's a great pleasure to look at the numbers growing and growing of the people participating into this webinar. So good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world. We have just heard from the moderator that you're in Palau, and welcome to the Making Waves Women in Hydrography webinar held for the International Women's Day 2025. And many thanks to the speakers and the moderator of this webinar for agreeing to celebrate this day together with the International Hydrographic Organization. It is my pleasure to have you here today, so many. We are now at 150. And from the last news that I heard from the Secretariat, we reached 361 registered people to this webinar, an exceptional number for an IHO online event. The International Hydrographic Organization, for everybody, is an intergovernmental organization that has been working since 1921 to ensure that all the world seas, oceans, and navigable waters are surveyed and charted. The IHO coordinates the activities of national hydrographic offices, promotes uniformity in nautical charts and documents, issues survey best practice, provides guidelines to maximize the use of hydrographic survey data, and develops hydrographic capabilities in member states. From our latest survey, women represent the 25% of the workforce in hydrography. If we talk about leading positions, such as chairs of IHO bodies, the percentage is similar. But since 2021, remember this year, the number of women chairing IHO bodies has increased by 11%, whilst the women serving as national hydrographers has now reached the 10% of the entire hydrographic offices in this planet, better than the situation as of 2021. To address this, the IHO launched in 2021 the Empowering Women in Hydrography project to raise awareness about career opportunities in hydrography and increase the number of women in leadership positions. Since the project launch, in less than 4 years of life, there have been 11 training or internship opportunities, benefiting 30 candidates from 28 countries. Additionally, online events, webinars, and seminars have been held. Currently, applications are open for the IDO 3 certification with the French Hydrographic Service SHOM, the École Nationale Supérieure de Techniques Avancées Bretagne, and the French Hydrographic Association. A webinar with the International Maritime Pilots Association, IMPA, which is represented here today. I saw someone from IMPA, is planned, and other initiatives such as a mentoring program and a new survey on a percentage of women employed in hydrographic offices in leadership roles are also underway. This highlights the clear and firm intent of the international hydrographic community through its 100 IHO member states to invest in and increase the visibility of hydrography worldwide, providing a range of opportunities with the ultimate aim of promoting a quality and professional approach to one of the world's most beautiful and stimulating professions, hydrography. Inspired by knowledge of the oceans, and today more than ever, respect for the marine environment, increasingly under pressure from the needs of an ever-growing and increasingly demanding world population. We hope that hearing today's stories from women who have built careers in this marine science will inspire more people to explore career paths in hydrography. We also hope to spark interest among professionals in other marine sciences by highlighting how hydrography supports marine activities across all fields and domains. I hope you enjoy the next hour, and we look forward to seeing you again at future IHO events, remaining available to respond to questions with the other speakers. Thank you very much for your participation and kind attention. And the floor is yours, dear moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Luigi. So this evening or this morning, we're going to hear from some fantastic women. So we're going to have a presentation from each of them. And then after that, we're going to have a question and answer session. So if you can see a question and answer button on your screen, feel free to pop some questions into there and we can ask them towards the end. If you can't see a question and answer session, feel free to pop them in the general chat. So we're going to start up first with my boss, who's sitting here beside me, Commodore Robin Phillips. Commodore Phillips is currently the Hydrographer of Australia, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her career and how she became the Hydrographer of Australia. So over to you, Robin.
Thank you. Hello, as Hilary said, so I'm the National Hydrographer of Australia, but I have not had a career directly in the hydrographic industry. So as you may be able to tell, or from the way I was introduced, I am a senior officer in the Royal Australian Navy, and my military career has been predominantly in meteorology and oceanography, which does have a connection to hydrography. So I joined the Navy straight out of high school, and I was inspired to do so because I had an opportunity to have a 10-day experience on the Royal Australian Navy sail training ship Young Endeavour, and that just made me kind of interested in what navigating ships was about, so I decided to join. It was also helpful that in joining the Navy, I got the opportunity to go through the Australian Defence Force Academy so that I could study a degree, as that was important to me. The actual degree was not so important, but I wanted to at least study at that level. And the Navy offered me this opportunity to study for 3 years, and all I had to do was work for 4 years afterwards. So that seemed like a pretty good deal to me. And I did it with the intention that I was going to leave straight after my 7 years. So let's fast forward to the beginning of this year, and I have just completed my 35th year in Navy. After I finished my Bachelor of Science degree in computer science, Navy then took me off and taught me how to be an officer watch on a ship and to drive a warship. That was really quite fun, I have to say. But that exposed me to so many things about what happens with ships at sea. It was just a great experience. Once I got that qualification, I then had an opportunity to go and study meteorology and later to get a Master's of Science in Oceanography, where I actually did my thesis in ocean modelling, so to understand how currents work in the ocean. So back within Defence, I've used these meteorology and oceanography skills to support defence activities, with the idea being that I understand what's happening in the environment and that I can then describe how the environment is going to affect the defence operations. The simplest way I can describe that is you can imagine a warship or a ship on the water and the waves are moving the ship around, and the poor helicopter is trying to land on the back of the ship that's also moving, and the two of them have to be in sync, and so the helicopter can land on the ship. And that can only be achieved if you understand what the wind's doing, what the waves are doing, so that everyone understands how to control their respective vessels to make that work. Additionally, we also use our oceanography skills to understand how sound moves through the water, so that you can use that to either find a submarine that might be hiding there, or the submarine can use that knowledge to stay hidden and not be found. So as I've progressed through my military career, I've moved through leadership positions, starting from managing a small team of 5 people through to being the commanding officer of a military airfield responsible for over 2,000 people. And they were people from not only the Australian Navy, but also our Army and our Air Force, as well as civilians, and included 4 military helicopter squadrons. I am now in a very senior leadership role where I oversee the Australian Hydrographic Office, and I also oversee the Maritime Geospatial Intelligence section, which does military hydrographic, meteorology and oceanography. I am pleased to say that I have seen a lot of change in the Royal Australian Navy as well as broader Australian Defence Force over my 35 years. If I go back to the very beginning when I first joined, I was issued men's uniform. There were some women's uniform, but there were also more men's uniform than we really should have had. When I first went to sea on a warship, I was one of 4 women of a crew of about 220 men. And whilst there are great improvements into where we are now, it is still not perfect. I still see women struggling with managing their family responsibilities and juggling work at the same time. I still see many meetings and senior leadership teams being predominantly men. But I am pleased to say that in my current workplace, I work for a female boss, and in my leadership group, working for her, so we're a group of 8 and only 2 are men. And that is kind of the first time we've ever been in that ratio. It's a great working environment. If I want to look at some of the challenges I've had during my career, I think my challenge is probably one that is common amongst many of us, and that is it's really easy to suffer from self-doubt and think we're not good enough and don't deserve to be here. And I think it's really incredible now to see so many mentoring opportunities, the fact that mentoring exists, with opportunities out there. And I often wish I'd been exposed to that and also had examples of women in leadership to look up to, rather than being one of the early ones moving through the system. And I think the one thing I would say is to try not to be scared of taking advantage of an opportunity when it presents itself. There are always unknowns, but the doors that may open can take you to places that you may never have imagined possible. And I know this from just being my time on that sail training ship back before I even joined the Navy. The first night at sea was really awful and I got seasick. And then the next day we were being asked to climb up the sails to do things with the sails on a tall ship. And that was kind of scary to do that on a moving platform. But over the 10-day journey, we were encouraged and supported, and I gave it a go and then really loved it. And that then inspired me to be here where I am today. I have enjoyed my career in the Royal Australian Navy. There have been so many different opportunities. And we always say that if you're not enjoying your current role, you just have to wait until the end of your current posting to look forward to the next exciting job. That is the advantage of being in the military, where we move around a lot. I also feel very lucky to live in a country where I've been able to give it a go and be exposed to a variety of interesting jobs. I like the fact that I have seen Navy change over the 35 years, so it is a much better workplace to where I have been. But as always, there is more to be done, and it is changing for the better. And I really hope that some of the other speakers you'll hear from today will inspire you to go and be even more amazing. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Robin. And what a story, and what a career, and all starting out on a tall ship. So how fantastic. Next up, we're going to hear from Helen Stewart. So Helen is a consultant hydrographer with Fugro in the Coastal Resilience and Ocean Science section. So Helen, can I get you to tell us your story?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm as said, I'm Helen Stewart. I am a member of the Hydrographic Society of the U.S., and I have been working with the IHO's Empowering Women in Hydrography project for about 4 years now in various roles. And in place of, instead of speaking of some of the advocacy work like I've done, this time I'm going to focus on what I have done throughout my career, and I have done a little bit of everything. I have done everything from nautical chart hydrography, deep ocean research, benthic habitat mapping, seep exploration, engineering surveys, near shore surveys, and I've now gotten into inland hydrography. And before going into a bit more detail, I do want to make a couple of points. The first point is that if you are in a hiring manager role, no matter what it is, if you are not looking for talented people in whatever shape, size, color, language, background they come from, if you are deliberately not looking for talented people, then you're making your own job harder and you're jeopardizing your organization's mission for no good reason. It's worth it to put the effort to find the talent that is out there. And the other point that I want to make is that women participating in spatial science fields has happened as long as those spatial science fields have existed. The text on the right-hand side of that slide talks about a woman named Madame Zhao who embroidered a military map on silk, which at the time was a huge technological advance. You can hang a silk map on the wall and it won't get damaged. You can pin things to it. You can roll it up for storage or for transport. If it gets wet, you just hang it to dry. You can add new information to it by sewing new embroidery onto it, or remove information that you know is wrong by unpicking the silk. Outside of my workplace, I am a couture seamstress, so I know exactly how much work that is. And I have done cartography and I know exactly how much work that is. So this was a profound talent to have done this work to the point where multiple surviving records of it from 2,000 years ago exist. So women have always been part of this profession. I did not come into hydrography from a surveying background. I came in from a background in mathematics and marine science. And I started going offshore as an assistant survey technician for the NOAA ship Thomas Jefferson back in 2003. At NOAA, I got an absolutely outstanding start to my career through on-the-job training through some truly top-class individuals. The image I'm showing here was actually my very first shipwreck. We were out doing a charting survey in Long Island Sound. This was the Raison 8125 was doing its job, and suddenly out of nowhere, this 80-meter long downed vessel appeared, and there was lots of squealing and noise from excitement. And later we came back with the Thomas Jefferson itself, which is a 65-meter long survey vessel, towing a side scan sonar to get the image that you see in the top right. And we actually have, let's see if it'll come up. There it is. We actually found historical records of what the shipwreck was. I worked for NOAA for 5 years. I left the civil service in 2008 and went to the public sector for personal reasons that were unrelated to either the job, the people, or working in federal service. It was an outstanding start to my career. I would not have gone as far as I did in my career without the on-the-job training and mentorship that I got at NOAA, and I'm really quite grateful for my time working there. And in the public sector, as introduced, I do work for Fugro. I have been working for Fugro for 17 years now, and between 2011 and 2013, I worked exclusively on this ship with the autonomous underwater vehicle, the AUV crew. It is the orange robot submarine you see hanging off the back deck. And I spent a total of about 5 years working on AUV projects between Guyana, Greenland, and everywhere else in between. And one of my fondest memories working on this vessel was the day the Curiosity rover landed on Mars. It happened at shift change. The entire crew, except for the captain and the mate, were on the bridge, who were on the bridge at the time. The entire crew was in the galley watching the CNN live feed of Mission Control back in Houston. I was sitting next to my coworker, Brad, and I remember seeing somebody clench a fist, and I said to him, "They got it." And about 2 seconds later, the rest of Mission Control caught up, and everybody started cheering because Curiosity had touched down safely. And on board, we all cheered. And then a few hours after a robot spaceship landed on Mars, we put a robot submarine in the water and sent it to look at the ocean floor. And if that's not the coolest thing I've ever done in my career, it's very, very high on that list. A couple years later, in 2015, I had this point risen in my career to the point where I was the lead data processor, so the lead scientist on board the vessel. And I got to shake down a new ship. And if you are not familiar with the term, a shakedown cruise is the first scientific voyage of a new survey vessel. We turn on all the instruments and we try them out at every possible combination of operating modes to make sure that they're operating within tolerances and we understand how this vessel will behave. We took it down to the Keithley Canyon in the Gulf of Mexico, which is this Y-shaped submarine canyon here. The water depth ranges from about 500 meters where my mouse is all the way down to 3,200 meters, and put the sonar through the paces to see what it could do. Later on, we were working in shallower water somewhere on the white box on the upper right-hand side of the image, and we found the cluster of naturally occurring seabed seeps. Not long after the shakedown cruise, I developed a health issue that brought my offshore career to a swift and unexpected end. And this is something that happens all the time. People develop health issues and they are no longer able to go to sea. People decide that they want to have a family and they want to be on land. And this includes men too. I know men who actually want to see their children and see their families and be around them. So they decide that offshore is no longer where they want to be. They may just decide that they're tired of working offshore. It is exhausting. You are away from home and everything you love for a while. And so there are plenty of people in this profession who have made that transition. There are plenty of jobs available for people who are transferring from sea work to land work, ranging from project management to GIS to operations, policy, and research. So that was what happened to me. I transferred into an office role where I divided my time between supporting operational projects and then more developmental projects. And one of those developmental projects, my boss's boss told me, "Helen, I want you to work with Rob on this project that he's doing." And it's my boss's 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 boss. So the answer is okay. And it was my first active work with satellite remote sensing. I was aware of satellite dry bathymetry at that point, but I hadn't done it myself. And then one day, my colleague sent me an image with a very distinctive turbulence pattern in the water, which if you see one, it always indicates that there is a danger to navigation there on the seafloor. And I thought, oh, wow, we can do something with this. So the image here is me up on stage at the 2020 Canadian Hydrographic Conference in Quebec City, making a presentation about it. And this is the image that got my attention. The yellow box in the middle contains what is called a vortex street. And the vortex street formed because a very strong tidal current was passing by the shipwreck in the lower right-hand corner. And later that year, I published my first ever scientific paper in a peer-reviewed journal about satellite vorticity observations in hydrography in the IHO's own journal, the IHR. At that conference in Quebec City, there was an engineer working for a Canadian government agency, and he approached me to talk about my presentation. And then later he introduced me to another person at a different Canadian government research agency. And over the last 4 years, I've been working with structural engineers at the Construction Research Center of the National Research Council of Canada to bring hydrospatial satellite remote sensing data into a larger program of satellite remote sensing based structural health monitoring for bridges and civil structures. And this slide shows an example from a recent paper we collaborated on, where we tested using an elevation model from multispectral satellite imagery to support the analysis of radar imagery. This is the Samuel de Champlain Bridge in Montreal in Canada. And why I chose this image out of all of the ones in that presentation is it also shows the interplay between roadway transportation networks and maritime transportation networks. The reason this bridge has such a very asymmetrical elevation profile is the statutory minimum air draft of the St. Lawrence Seaway shipping channel. And when we presented this research at a conference, I was talking with a group of the engineers, and one of them looked at me and said, "So, Helen, what are conferences like in your world?" Meaning hydrography. And I thought about that for a second, because how do you answer a question like that? And then the answer popped into my head, and I pointed at my feet and I said, "I'm the only person here wearing octopus socks. Normally, in my world, there are a lot more sea monsters." And the career transition from deep ocean acoustic hydrography, where we see sea monsters in the ROV camera video on a regular basis, to looking at rivers and bridges from space has frankly been a wild, wild ride. It's been an enormous challenge. It's been hugely educational, but I'm still doing hydrography. It's just a new and unique kind of hydrography, and I'm really lucky to have that opportunity. So that's about it for my time. Thank you again to the IHO for organizing this and inviting me, and over to others.
Thanks, Helen. That was great, really interesting, and I had no idea about the embroidered map, and I can only imagine how long it would take to embroider a map, having made paper charts in the past, but I can't imagine embroidering one. But wow. Okay, next we're going to hear from Mariah McCooey from Ocean Sciences in Canada, the Institute of Ocean Sciences in Canada. So over to you, Mariah.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. It is very early here on the west coast of Canada, but I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. My name is Mariah McCooey, and I am the Director of Hydrography with the Canadian Hydrographic Service for the Pacific coast of Canada. So my chunk is the Pacific side of Canada, and it's a super interesting place. And it's very, very cool to see in the chat all the different locations everyone's representing here. Like, just wonderful. Really, really amazing to see so many people showing up for such a great event. Really want to thank the IHO for meeting the moment here and understanding that there's a real criticality right now to focusing on this human element in hydrography and in every field. We're facing really interesting times geopolitically and all kinds of stuff. And we're going to see, I think, hydrography just grow in relevance for all kinds of reasons. And because of that, I think that focusing on inclusion and diversity and psychosocial safety and all those things that make a workplace really high functioning are really, really important. It doesn't just make a workplace nice and fun. It really makes an efficient, cost-effective, high-flying workplace. And in hydrography, we have really interesting challenges, and we're going to need to unlock all that creativity in order to meet the moment. So yeah, we're facing down a real shortage of people in industry-wide. And I think we're on the right track here by identifying that women are one of the key stakeholder groups that we can kick down the door and bring in all kinds of diverse perspectives that are going to help us solve some of these really thorny problems. The more people you have in a room that have a different perspective and a different background, the more types of creative approaches we're going to find to be able to solve some of these problems. And also just from the fact of like the shortage of people, women are 50% of the earth. So if we're not actively breaking down barriers and identifying those barriers to participation, then we're missing out on a huge group of people that can help and can contribute really meaningfully. Helen mentioned also that there's a lot of jobs in hydrography and in the broader maritime context that are not strictly operational. And I think this is a major selling point, a major feature that we don't talk about enough for recruitment. I came into this world not through hydrography at all, although I find myself as a director of hydrography. Sometimes I feel like a bit of an imposter because I came through this very much from the hydrography client side. So my career thus far, about 18 years with the Federal Public Service in Canada, has been mostly operational. So through Coast Guard, I did officer training with the Canadian Coast Guard, and then was posted as a navigation officer for several years on the ships on the east coast of Canada, doing icebreaking and search and rescue and buoy tending, so placing and replacing navigation aids and all kinds of other really exciting um, things. And when I had my first child, I was not able to go to sea anymore, but that's actually kind of where my career started, which is really interesting because from going ashore and getting a master's degree, that opened up so many interesting doors. I went right from working on ships to working in communications, and then for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Canada. And then I was a harbor master, which was a really interesting operational safety and security focused job, requiring some really creative and interesting leadership. And then from there, I did a little deviation into the private sector, and worked for a very large ferry company here on the West Coast. And then I went back to the Canadian government, where I worked for Coast Guard for several years, managing the search and rescue program. And then just 1 year ago, I got this job as director of hydrography, and I have to say I'm loving it. It's so interesting. Hydrography is fascinating. I think after a year, I barely scratched the surface of understanding the scope and complexity of this work. But I'm really lucky to have just a brilliant team that they really know what they're doing, and it's fascinating and meaningful work. And it's neat because even though I don't understand all the acronyms and technicalities of it, I on a deep level understand the importance of the work. Having been a navigation officer and knowing very viscerally the trust that we put in these products when we're navigating ships, it's really easy to get excited about it, to like really feel the urgency of it. Yeah, so that's just to sort of highlight that there are a lot of interesting jobs throughout the maritime sector. And yeah, and I would really encourage everyone to not hesitate to take a risk. I think there are a lot of women here. There's also men on this, and I applaud the men for showing up for this as well. It's really wonderful to see you here, and thank you. Um, but if for the women, especially the younger women out there, follow your excitement. And Commander Phillips really mentioned a sailing trip that she went on early on in her life that it was exciting, and it popped a spark for her, and I can really relate to that too. I'm sure many people can, and it's like trust that little voice that says like this is something really cool. I want to follow this thread, and don't doubt that, because it always leads somewhere interesting. I have never had a plan for my career whatsoever. I've never said, oh, I'm aspiring to do this job or that job. It's always been a matter of just seeing something that's exciting, like, hey, I want to do what that person's doing, and then following that and seeing where it goes. So I really recommend sticking your neck out a bit. Apply on something that you think maybe you're not qualified for, um, just to see what happens. There's no harm there, and I've heard this statistic repeated a lot. I'm not sure where it came from, so take it with a grain of salt. But I've heard that men typically will be more likely to apply on job posters or competitions where they meet some of the qualifications, whereas women are much more hesitant to do that. We like to wait until we're 100% qualified, meet all the qualifications. And I would just say, like, apply on that job where you meet 75% of them and just see what happens. Because yeah, you really never know. And for those, that's kind of geared towards the the younger folks on here and once developing in their career, and to those kind of on the second half of their career, I really I found it really amazing to realize all of a sudden that, throughout my career, I've had amazing mentors and people that sort of reached down the ladder and pulled me up, and said like, hey, you need to do this, apply on that, do that, and really just like helped me and in really key moments. And it's been interesting to sort of wake up suddenly and realize like, whoa, wait a second, I am now that mid-career public servant that has the opportunity to help others, and reach down the ladder and pull people up. So I really been seeking out opportunities to do that recently, and it's really satisfying, really gratifying to get to be the person that's reaching down the ladder, instead of reaching up. Without having found myself in a senior leadership position. Yeah. So anyway, I really delighted to be here, and thanks again to the IHO for organizing this really awesome event. It's really fun to connect with people all over the world and talk about such a cool industry and the very meaningful goal of inclusion and increasing inclusion and representation across the board. So yeah, do hunt me down on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and I'm easy to find. It's Mariah McCooey, and looking forward to connecting with you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Mariah. That was fantastic. Some great advice there for us all. And I've also heard the same rumour on applying, and also try and ignore that and encourage women to apply even when they can just meet some of the criteria, because as you say, you never know who the competition is going to be and whether you're the right person for that role. You might get it even though you don't think you can do things first time round. So some great advice there. So as I said before, we're now going to come to a question and answer session. So if you've got a Q&A button, please feel free to write some questions in the chat and we'll have them read out and our presenters can respond to them. But while you're thinking up some great questions, I've got a great cliched one to start with. So if I could have Helen and Mariah just pop your cameras back on, and I'm going to ask you, knowing what you know today, what advice would you give to your younger self if you could? So I don't know who'd like to go first on what advice you'd give to your younger self. Helen, you look like you're thinking, so maybe you look like you're thinking as well. Mariah, do you have a response to what advice you would give to your younger self?
What advice would I give my younger self? Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, look for the people that are willing to teach you something and listen to them. I think especially as when I was really young, there's kind of this, especially as a woman, I think I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. Operationally, I'm out on the ships. I want to prove myself. I want to show that I earned my place here. I know what I'm doing. And I think that translated somewhat to, a bit of like, oh, you don't need to teach me this. I can figure this out myself. Like more than was necessary. It's good to hold your ground and hold your space and, figure it out yourself. But I think that if I could go back and redo it, I would probably just have my ears a little wider open, take a little more humility to it, and be a little more teachable, rather than saying, I know this, and then going to research it later. I could just say, yeah, what can you tell me about this? So yeah, if that's specific to me, that may not be the case for everyone, but I definitely would take off a little bit of that bravado edge out there on the water and just sort of like open my ears up a bit more.
Great, thanks, Mariah. Helen?
What I would tell my younger self is, and I've actually written about this before, that being a good scientist is all about working with other people. You do have to get fit for purpose scientific data. You do have to be mindful of the work that you're doing, but we're none of us sitting there in we're none of us sitting there in a room by ourselves with a little grab sample, geological grab sample. This is squeaky, by the way. We're none of us sitting there with a little geological grab sample deciding that, okay, this is 50% sand and 50% shell hash, and then that that sediment sample goes and sits in a closet forever and ever, and that was it, and we've just learned it, and that's not what we're here for. We are, and this is surveying, spatial science, hydrography. The Admiral mentioned it herself, that we are using this information to communicate things to other people, whether it is trying to safely land a helicopter on the deck of a ship, or it's the work that I have been doing with the Canadian government, where we are trying to find a way to monitor bridges to make sure that they are safe and they're fit for purpose. That requires a lot of working with people. I need to understand what the engineers are doing and why, in order to make recommendations about what I can do from a geodata, hydrodata, and multispectral satellite imagery perspective. They need to understand what I can do as a surveyor and a hydrographer to be able to incorporate that into their decision-making process. And when I was much younger, I focused a lot more time on the technical aspects and not on the underlying underpinnings of knowledge transfer that is what science is all about. And in hindsight, I wish I had done a better job of that, because it would have meant that I could have done so much more.
Thanks, Helen. And Robin, do you have something to add on that one?
Yeah, I think what I would tell my younger self would be to keep doing something you enjoy, and don't stick with something if you don't enjoy doing it, or it's not something you love or interested in. It's really hard to do something you don't like doing. So yeah, find the joy.
Excellent. Thanks, Robin. So we've got our first question that's come in through the Q&A function. So it says, what do you feel are the barriers to participation for women entering the industry? And that's from Sarah. So thank you, Sarah. And please feel free to put some more questions in the Q&A chat. But if any of you three lovely ladies would like to answer barriers to participation in women entering the industry.
If you don't mind, I can start. One big one, and this is true for anybody, is that you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know that a particular field or discipline exists, how can you possibly participate in it? And that's true across the board. There's a lot of advocacy work for women in science in general, which is fine, but if you are looking specifically for somebody who wants to do spatial science and surveying as a discipline, or oceanography, where is that coming from? Another one is, frankly, gatekeeping, where women learn from a very early point in their lives, oh, that's something that guys do. And that if you say to somebody, oh, that's something that guys do, nobody has ever said, but you can't do that too. But if you hear that, you get the message loud and clear that that's not for you. So there is gatekeeping involved there. One kind of gatekeeping that we do see, and if you look at the disciplines where women predominate in leadership, they almost always require some kind of advanced degree. So, and the degree inflation happens over and over. As more women get into leadership, they have to prove their credentials more and more and more and more, whereas that less qualified man might get a pass because of his potential. And so you have fields where all the women in them have master's degrees, clinical social work, for instance, where they have to come in with all of those extra credentials. They don't get the on-the-job training, and a lot of that is frankly from gatekeeping. Why can't you learn how to do that on the job?
I think the gatekeeping thing's quite interesting, just even with language. We always seem to refer to surveyors as he did this or he did that, and navigators and even masters of ships always seem to be referred to as he, rather than they or anyone really who can do that. Mariah or Robin, do you want to answer that
Yeah,
question
maybe I'll
about the
jump in there.
barriers for the industry? Yep.
I think, like, well, fortunately and unfortunately, a lot of the barriers for women participating are actually very simple things to correct. There's a lot of ergonomic aspects for women in the field, such as like personal protective gear that fits properly. Um, and as Commander Phillips mentioned, like uniforms and things that we're expected to wear that are key components of our job. It happens all too frequently that you show up at the store's warehouse where you're allotted your dry suit or your or whatever it is, or it's on the ship, and it's like, oh, the smallest size we have is a men's triple XL, and that's a problem. Both from a functional lens where it's difficult to move, but it also sends a strong message that, like, oh, we didn't expect to see you here, so you don't really belong here, and therefore you're going to have to wear this thing that's totally not meant for you. And you feel like a bit of a clown. I can definitely remember trying to lead fire drills as a chief officer on a ship, and I'm wearing men's size 10 boots that are so big that when I'm trying to walk up the stairs, my whole leg just comes right out of the boots. So these issues are really easy to resolve, and another example is uniforms. So maternity pants, and this is something that I corrected when I was working for the ferry company. The maternity pants were only available from the company uniform store, in the colors that were for the catering staff, so like the restaurant workers. And they didn't have the maternity pants for any of the deckhand or officer colors. And like that's such an easy thing to correct. I'd heard anecdotally from women working as deck officers that when they got pregnant, they had to go to a tailor and like get modified pants or whatever. And I just thought, like, that is like someone made that decision to, like, oh, we only need maternity pants for the catering staff. It just it's another example of like a such a micro barrier, but it's something that says, like, we didn't expect you to be here. We're gonna have to come up with something creative. So I think unfortunately the barriers are often like silly things like that, and which makes them really easy to nuke them. So when you come across them, I think we're at a point in the world where people want to fix these type of things. There's a huge general willingness to like correct these types of deficiencies. So speak up when you find them. Like, let someone know. Don't suffer in silence and go to the tailor and fix it yourself, because the next person coming down the pipe is going to also need the maternity pants in the dark blue color. So speak up. Say, make it known that, like, hey, this is basic. And I think when you do that in like an approachable, friendly way, like, people are willing to correct these types of things. And working together, we can eliminate so many of these speed bumps to getting women fully on board here. Thanks.
I have a
Thanks, Mariah.
comment. I have a comment to add to that. For the people who are listening in, who are in leadership roles, everything Mariah just described is a leadership problem. It is not a women problem. It is a leadership problem. And and I've seen this before in other contexts, where if something is an everybody problem, like personal protective equipment that does not fit and does not do its job, but it affects one group more, say women, then what happens is, because humans can be intellectually sloppy, and I say this because I've been there myself, they're like, oh, well, it's a women's problem. We'll let women fix it. When no, this is a leadership problem. You and the leadership are the people who have the budgets, the authority, and the balance sheets. Go buy personal protective equipment that fits your people properly. If you can't buy it, don't ask your very petite woman to walk around with sleeves on her coveralls that are that much longer. Go to a tailor and get them tailored to fit your people properly. You accomplish a few things. One, you spend all that time and effort and money to recruit these people. You need them, you need the workforce, you need the skills they provide. Are you really willing to watch them walk out the door over something as stupid as their pants are too long, which is also saying, well, we don't respect you enough to give you clothes that fit, or
Or a safe.
safe. Yeah. So you're saying I don't respect you, but also you are making it harder for everybody else to do their job if these people leave. But why is it on me to go find my own gloves, go find my own boots when it's taken care of for everybody else? So that's why we say it's a leadership problem. So leaders, please fix it. And I can actually speak for something like this. I gave a talk on women's safety offshore at the 2022 Canadian Hydro Conference, and the slide that I put in the chat window is from that one. And after that conference, I had a conversation with some university vessels in the States. And I said to them, okay, so here's something you can do today. You are sending these research vessels out. You know your crews months in advance. Pick up the phone and call these people and ask what size survival suit they need. And then make sure that when they get to the vessel, they have the survival suit they need in the correct size. And because this is an everybody problem, this affects very petite women more. But also, if you have some really big men or you have really small men, it makes it safer for them too. So yeah, the leaders, listen to your staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. So we've got another question that's come in from Mary. She says, which aspects of hydrography do you think are the most exciting at the moment? And where would you advise someone new to the industry to investigate? Robin, what's the most exciting thing coming up in hydrography?
But now I feel awkward. In fact, I think, to me, what's most exciting is projects like Seabed 2030 and trying to map the world, because it astounds me that we know what the moon and Mars look like way better than we do what the bottom of the ocean looks like. So I think just the general concept of trying to map and understand what's down there, that's exciting.
Agree. Mariah, what's exciting in your world of hydrography?
Oh gosh,
and where would you
like
suggest that Mary might be able to investigate?
yeah, I feel like I've sort of joined on this hydrography world at such an interesting time. It's absolutely awesome to see this huge leap happening from a very focused two-dimensional product for a very set client. You know, like Captain Highliner on a ship needs the paper chart. It's kind of the old paradigm. And we're very rapidly evolving right now into, I think I can only speak for, the Canadian version, but we've found ourselves at this confluence of really interesting objectives where people are realizing, like, wow, hydrographic services have access to a treasure trove of data. So we've shifted into this space of like data management and like being an ocean hub in a very dynamic way that's so much more than just creating two-dimensional products. We're creating four-dimensional products, and we're generating interest from so many different groups that you would never have expected to have any interest in hydrography. So it's like a very operational science, and then also we're like becoming a hub for climate change and tsunami inundation and sovereignty and mapping borders and all these very interesting files that traditionally were not really part of the suite of skills and needs. So it's a very interesting time. I think S100 for sure is like just a a huge leap, and it's really going to serve our stakeholder community in a big way. They are really excited about this, and I'm really thrilled with the S100 trial that we're doing in Canada coming up in June, which has been given the thumbs up by IHO, and I'm really excited about seeing that and seeing the input. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what's coming up for me around that. As far as like where to focus, like to position yourself, I don't know. I think probably Helen would. She's got the technical brain on this one much more than I do, but I sense that it's related to like data management, and like how are we gonna process complex streams of information coming at us from a lot of sources. This part is really exciting to me, like the crowdsourced bathymetry. Like how are we going to tap into that massive influx of energy and data that is right there at our fingertips? Like how are we going to make that useful to us and to meet some of these challenges like seabed 2030, like completing the ocean map, and that those are exciting challenges. So yeah.
Thanks, Mariah. Before we jump to Helen, we might just ask Luigi. Luigi, what's the most exciting thing coming up in hydrography from your perspective?
So you're asking this question to an old hydrographer. I entered the Naval Academy, and my main aim was to become an hydrographer. So I became an hydrographer, and now I can say that I tried all the different aspects from hydrography, starting from the very operational hydrography to managing hydrography to raise the awareness of hydrography around the world. And the beauty of hydrography is exactly that, to have a very varied spectrum of different activities. I heard about ocean map, seabed mapping. I heard about S100, crowdsourced bathymetry. They are all aspects. If you want to have from me the response, what's the most exciting part of hydrography from a perspective of almost a 60 years old man, it should be, from my perspective, to raise the awareness of hydrography and to enlarge the basket of people that knows what hydrography means, but not as only the meaning of the word, but the fact that it is functional of many things, especially in this very exciting time that we are going through for exploring and knowing better our ocean. Just let me mention just the very next important appointment, that is the United Nations Ocean Conference that will be held in France in June. So we are working very hard to make part of the political declaration that will be released at the end of UNOC 3, the fact that seabed mapping is a priority for this humanity. So that means that there is a very varied spectrum of activities into hydrography, but for me, the most important is should be to raise the awareness of this beautiful discipline, and make everybody aware of the importance of this discipline. Thank you.
Did everybody just drop out then? Looks like we're back.
I think you may have froze. Yeah.
I think we're good now.
Okay.
Now it's okay, yeah. From you're not anymore frozen.
Okay. It was
okay.
us that was frozen. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you finish, Luigi?
Yes, I finished. I spoke too much.
Excellent. Thank you. Helen, did you want to add anything into the most exciting thing coming up in hydrography? It sounds like you're on the cutting edge already with satellites and bits and pieces, but anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, so I am extremely biased. I am basically building a new branch of scientific inquiry in hydrography from scratch. And something very fun about doing original research is you feel like an idiot all of the time. Nobody knows what you're doing. Nobody has figured it out. So you try something out and you think, well, this should work. Why doesn't it work? It's because of something else that you haven't thought of yet. But there's something else going on in hydrography that I find also incredibly exciting. As sensors have gotten smaller, less expensive, and easier for people to use, then suddenly we are now at a point where the kind of hydrographic data that I showed in that very first picture of my very first shipwreck back in 2003, that is something that if you are, to pick an example, not even slightly at random, if you are in one of the small Arctic communities working with the Canadian Hydrographic Service on the Community Hydrography Project, which is amazing, by the way, if you haven't read into it, you should. It's now something that we're setting up the ability for people to better understand what's going on in the environment around their own communities. They can better understand what is happening and why. They can take a bit more control of their own destinies, and not just for safety of navigation purposes, which is like what the community hydrography program is doing. I spent a lot of last year working on a underwater archaeology program on a lake in Montana, which if you had told me that 20 years ago as a saltwater girl that I would be doing work in a lake in Montana, I would have said, what? But because we are able to go out and do this, the people in that community have all kinds of questions and all sorts of interest. What do we want to know? What can we do with this? And so it sparked a lot of discussions on historical preservation, water quality. Can we train people for jobs? Like there's all this stuff coming out of a 7-day project up in the work area with a multibeam and a side scan. And it's been amazing to watch. We can do this all over the world now with smaller, cheaper sensors. We can use satellite remote sensing. We can use training modules that are available online and accessible to people. You don't have to move across the world to go to Plymouth to be in the Cat A program. You can do it from, say, Fiji, or you can do it from Tonga, or you can do it from Houston.
I'd recommend doing it from Palau. It's a beautiful country here in Palau where we've had our Southwest Pacific meeting this week. So yes, and you're right, we are being able to do much more from where we live. I mean, we'll be able to be controlling survey vessels on the other side of the world while we're sitting in our bedrooms before we know it. So
it's already
lots of
here.
advances coming our way.
It's already here in industry. What you just described is already here in industry.
I know it's not quite here for us, but yes, we hear about it. We see the videos. I think we've got time for one last question. So I'm going to go with one from Rosa. So thank you, Rosa. During your careers in hydrography, what has been the biggest challenge that you have faced and how did you confront it? Any volunteers to go first?
Sure, I'll jump in there. The one that sort of comes to mind is grappling with that shift from operational to office-based working. It was quite a thing to get my head around, having been only operational, working on tall ships and Coast Guard ships, and then all of a sudden working in an office. And there's just so many adjustments, like mentally and physically and operationally, to like how I do work. I didn't even know at that point how to like you do a conference call. At this point, conference calls, not Teams calls, but how to, the etiquette of like addressing an email and how you put people in twos and CCs, and there's just all these rules and things that about working ashore that I had no clue about, and so that was really difficult, adjusting from that sort of like operational lens to a shore-based lens, and so it's something that I really like to help people out with when I see others that are making that move. How to apply on job postings and how to, when I was running my previous division in search and rescue, I had a lot of people making that transition from ship to shore, and I made sure to like take some time and explain explicitly, like, this is how a meeting works. This is how you structure a meeting. Like there's unspoken rules around these things that that can be really difficult to wrap your head around. So that was one challenge that I found really quite difficult. So yeah, that's it.
Thanks. And Robin, do you want to jump in?
So in my short hydrography career as such as Australia's hydrographer, I think my biggest challenge is trying to get my head around what it means for Australia to be doing hydrography and to be able to try and represent the things I need to represent about aspects of science that wasn't what I had actually spent my whole career training in. So even though what I've done has a strong connection, it still isn't the same. And I've had to learn an awful lot about what our ships are doing, how they work, what the cartographers are doing. And I think my biggest advice would be to work with your team and listen to what they say, and ask lots of questions. Don't stay ignorant.
Thanks, Robin. So we're drawing to a close now, and I'd like to invite Dr. Roberta Evaldi, the Associate Professor in Marine Geology at the Italian Hydrographic Institute, to give us some closing words. Over to you, Roberta.
Thank you. I share my screen.
I can't see it yet.
Okay.
Oh, yes, now we have it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It is a great opportunity and privilege to be here with you at Making Waves, Women in Hydrography webinar, an IHO activity held for the International Women's Day 2025. Helen, Marian, Robin, Hilary told us their experiences in making waves. They are a clear example of the fact that we can have different profiles and share the same vision. Let me tell you a little about myself and my vision. This is the ocean from a window. Same window, same ocean, several views for an unknown ocean. We know how this ocean is unexplored, but our ocean is without limits to the knowledge. The ocean is breath, biodiversity, communication, resources, energy, security, life, health, inspiration. We are contributing to this exploration and knowledge all together. Let me show you 30 years of activity at sea as a PhD student, as a researcher, and later as a professor in marine geology. I've been following my dream with curiosity, determination, and an optimistic smile on my face. And finally, my dream came true, exploring the poles, the deepest sector of the Arctic Ocean. A new robot, a transformable robot, to explore and map ice, water column, and seabed altogether. During time, I maintain the same smile and positive approach with the efforts of my mentors, colleagues, family, friends, and students, the young generation. This slide shows 20 years of training, high education courses, and just over 300 students in hydrography from 4 continents, 21 countries, of which 20% are women. A young generation of hydrographers. This young generation is 26% foreign women, 30% Navy officers, and 44% civilians. Let me share you their messages, but you can read this message from everyone. We are a powerful generation of hydrographic surveyors, and we are breaking the bias against women in the offshore world. We see no gender. We are just professionals. Shoulder by shoulder, to sail against adversities. Breath, relax, drink water, keep going. And then their messages: paddle your own canoe. You cannot cross the ocean until you find the courage to lose sight of the shore. You need to be curious and brave to explore the underwater world. Have fun doing what you are doing. You never know who is watching, and above all, who are motivating. Success doesn't make you shine. Your resilience does. Two sides of the same coin. Be always curious and chase your dreams. I love what I do because as a small stone can change the results of a hydrographic survey, my teeny contribution to research can lead to great steps for science and progress. Hydrography, it means through which every day I discover and I share a new piece of creation. And through its challenges, I discover and share a new piece of myself. A deep knowledge is the ability to look behind the horizon. I'm really enthusiastic and always keen to learn, so I am always positive. And I really, really enjoy my job, so I said. Always believe something wonderful is about to happen. From every small action, always a change arises. No limits, just horizons. Fair winds, the science we need for the ocean we want. Making waves. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. What's a great way to finish a presentation with those words from some even more inspiring women. So just before we close tonight, can I just say a great big thank you again to the IHO for the opportunity in running this webinar, having the idea and asking us all to contribute. It's been a fantastic event. And could we all use the react button on your screen to give a thumbs up or a clap or some sort of reaction, because we can't really clap in real time. So if you could use your react button, that would be great. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Sarah, did you want any closing words, or we're all good to sign off?
Yeah, I would just like to say briefly, on behalf of the IHO Secretariat, we would like to thank everyone for joining this webinar. And especially, we would like to acknowledge and thank all of the member states who have provided funding for this initiative over the years. So Canada, Norway, Belgium, and now Denmark, who is providing funding for 2025. And also, we would like to thank the countries who support the project, such as the United Kingdom and France. Sorry, I'm just trying to switch off my phone. The United Kingdom and France, but also all the countries and hydrographic offices around the world who participate in initiatives and attend events such as these. We'll be posting a video tomorrow on the IHO social media channels, which showcases women working in different areas of hydrography, and we invite you all to watch it. So thank you and goodbye.
Farewell from Palau.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.